Hello, Patricia. So your topic, she asked, and not a question. It's funny how often when I get these topics, it's just a word, right? So, which is fine. The thing is, you can go off in so many directions. So, but I think that's the point, right? You want to see what I say, see what comes up spontaneously. So I'm cool with that. I'm down with that. So happiness is the topic. So yeah, just like laughter was a previous video I just did. Happiness, where do you start, right? Well, why don't we start with what's happiness? What the heck is this thing we call happiness? Well, happiness is different for everybody, right? What makes one person happy, right? It's different from what makes another one happy. What one person perceives as happiness is different from another. You know, everything here is based on perception. But generally, happiness is what we think of as a state in which we are in an upbeat, light, joyous kind of semi-peaceful state, where we're enjoying ourselves, or we're enjoying whatever it is that we're perceiving as the source of the happiness. So there's the tricky rub, though. There's the tricky rub. That's the thing. So right off the bat, I'll tell you what I've posted about a lot over the years, and that is happiness. For me, I think, and for many others, I've come to discover that happiness really is a choice. It really is. True happiness is a choice, because when we're still holding on to lots of pain and baggage and suffering, and if we're heavy in mind chatter, it's still very traumatized and conditioned by society, and taking that trauma and conditioning and reinforcing it with our own thoughts and stories, and basically poking our wounds and really just making it worse, and as an excuse to suffer even more and more. So when all that kind of happens, when we're in that state, when we're in a very confusing states, which we often are in our lives, on and off, people will search for happiness outside of themselves, and when they're in those deep states of depression or sadness or confusion or mind states of mind chatter and judgment and all that kind of stuff, we have trouble being happy or finding happiness, or even knowing how to, because deep down we haven't actually chosen to be happy. In fact, we've made an unconscious decision not to be happy. I know that sounds weird to some, but it's true. A lot of times as humans, we generally, when we're heavily conditioned and traumatized, we become so used to the pain and the trauma that we're afraid. Our minds are the core fear that drives all of humanity's madness. I feel is the fear of the unknown. When you get rid of all the core fear, all the other little fears in life, it really just boils down to the one that's left standing after all the fears go away, and that's the fear of the unknown. And that comes from the mind. The mind the ego wants to believe that it's the being, that it's the end-all, be-all, and it's afraid not to exist. It's afraid of the magic. It's afraid of the unknown, which is why the mind, especially a very busy and mind that's very in control, will resist silence or meditation. It gets bored, it gets agitated, it doesn't want to do it, which is why people that when are suggested, who are having problems to go to meditation, there's a lot of resistance and struggle there at first, but sometimes for a while, and it's because the mind, it doesn't want to go to that place, because in that place it's sitting inside, it doesn't really exist, and that's what it's afraid of. So to get back to happiness, so when we're in those states, that mind will unconsciously will choose what it's familiar with, which is pain. Which is why we see that people that have been heavily traumatized, like say abuse for instance, will get away from one relationship of abuse and then just go into another and another and another. Well, why is that? I mean, if you've really had enough, you know, like say it starts in childhood, right? And how many people have been abused by their parents? A lot, most really in one way or another. But the severe cases, let's just say, let's just say an alcoholic, physically abusive dad, right? Let's just say there's a trillion of those, right? Of people that don't speak to their dad, haven't since they were children, and they hate their dad or resentful. They just don't speak to him because they don't speak to him because, of all the abuse, right? So they've chosen at one point to step away from that, and they don't want it. And then what are those, not always, but a lot of times, what do we see those people do? They end up in relationships over and over with a version of their dad, right? And there's a million examples. I'm just picking the most obvious, and it's men or women. I mean, it's not exclusive to anybody or any. But the point is, something inside is choosing because it's familiar to go, and it's also the mind wants to fix. So it didn't fix what was going on with, say, the dad. So unconsciously, it's an unconscious need to want to try to resolve. But because it's unconscious, there is no real effort, or not at first anyways, or for a long time, is there no conscious effort to resolve. So it's not getting resolved, it's just repeated. But it's because of an unconscious need to resolve. But it's also an unconscious need of familiarity. And people do get used to the pain, and they're afraid of not having that pain around, or that person who gives them pain. So, again, it's that kind of mentality, that kind of part of the mind and ego that will unconsciously choose the latter and not actually choose happiness, and not actually make real strong efforts towards happiness. Because once we choose, and I know where I speak because I've done videos before about my past. I won't get into it. This video is getting long as it is, but way back in the day when I was in my teens, I hated myself. I mean, I absolutely hated life. I hated myself. I mean, truly. I mean, I hated everything about myself. For so long, I took what little trauma I had in my life, and I just, exacerbated it in my own mind, and really, I just bullied myself and traumatized myself to such an extreme. I hit such a rock bottom. So it's amazing how we can do that. So when we're in that kind of thing, we won't actually do things first of all, we're not choosing happiness. And we're not doing anything. And so even when people say, go do this to make yourself happy, or go do that, people won't. I know, whenever I've counseled or coached people that are in, these kind of states, it's really difficult, sometimes next to impossible, to get them to do things that make them happy, because first of all, they don't even know what makes them happy a lot of times. But even if they do, they'll say, sure, yeah, but some part of them will just do it half-assed or not do it at all. They just won't do the things that make them happy. So again, that's why I say it's important that happiness is a choice. It really is. Something in you has to make a real choice to be happy. Once that choice is made, truly made, on some deep level, and you might have slips, it doesn't mean then you'll always be happy. No, you might have, like everybody else, you might still have little bits of struggle and pain, but generally you'll be on the path of happiness. Generally, meaning you won't, you'll do things to make yourself happy. And if you go off the path a little, you'll catch yourself and you'll go back. So when you choose happiness, then you'll do things. You'll actually put it into motion. You'll put it into action. And you'll do things to treat yourself and make yourself happy. You'll romance yourself. So happiness truly is a choice. It really is a choice. So if you haven't really chosen, if you're not committed to being happy, then you're going to struggle until you're ready to choose. And once you truly choose it, everything will change. Because you'll always be on your own side. You'll always be nurturing and taking care of yourself. Because that's your mission. And then the only thing there is just find out what makes you happy. And then the only catch, though, is just because the mind will jump in, like in all things, and try to take control. It tries to take control of, of life. It takes control of any spiritual journey, of any, anything. It wants to jump in, and then it can tend to go overboard and twist it, right? So just be careful that if you are choosing happiness, that sure, they're outer things. We live in a world full of outer phenomena, which is phenomenal, and it's paradise here. It can be. So enjoy those things. But make sure deep down that you're making the choice to be happy, and that and that you're happy just to be you. So marinate in yourself a lot and find the happiness and joy in that too. Don't just go out and just try to fill up your time with activities and things that make you happy. Do those things, absolutely. But don't rely on those things, because again, that's where it can get tricky. Because if your happiness depends on how much money you have, or whether how much, of the activities you like to do, you're doing, well, sometimes we can't always do those things. Life happens, and so again, just happiness really does come from within. It doesn't come from without. This outer phenomenon can assist, and others can assist, but no thing, and especially no one's going to make you happy. And that's another big one I quickly want to talk about, is the bulk of the world, really. We're traumatized and conditioned to go out and seek happiness from another person, from other people, which is why a lot of people don't like to be alone. They need to be in groups, or they need to always be in some kind of relationship, and they'll cling on to all those because some part of them needs that to be happy. Well, if you can meet the most incredible person in the world, but if you haven't made the choice to be happy, and if you can't make yourself happy, guess what, folks? That person's never going to be able to make you happy. Trust me on this. I know from where I speak. They can assist. If you meet a emotionally, spiritually healthy person who loves themselves and loves life, doesn't mean they're perfect, but still is very full of life and love and joy, you can get a relationship with them. But if you don't love yourself, if you haven't made the real choice, you'll have some happiness, but eventually things will break down and things will come to light, and all the stuff you're holding on to, all the chains and the pain will come to the surface. And it doesn't mean the relationship will end. 9 times out of 10 it will, but I'm not saying it absolutely will, because it's possible maybe you can figure it out and repair or resolve or whatever, but it's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, to really, like I said, that person, because you're not making yourself happy, that person won't be able to do it. If you're really not going to make the choice to be happy, nothing they can do. They might temporarily be able to make you happy, but eventually, no. And then you're going to become, it's going to be a codependent relationship too, because you're going to be dependent on them making you happy. And then they're going to be exhausted because then they're feeling like they have to all the time. And then they're going to feel the resistance too, because then the more that dynamic goes on, then the mind will resist and make the other one work harder to make them happy. So then the other person's trying and trying to make them happy. Yeah, it becomes a mess and twisted. So again, just to get back to main point, happiness is a choice, folks. So, and don't be fooled. Sometimes the mind will say, oh, okay, I want to be happy. Well, that's fine. But if it's true, then you'll see it. You'll see it happen. You'll see naturally a buildup of, not a buildup, but you'll see some momentum. You'll see that you'll start naturally doing things to make yourself happy. And when you're not happy, you'll take action. And you'll start to nurture that and nurture yourself. And that's the direction you'll see. If it's the mind just bullshitting itself, then in time you'll see it. And that's fine. You'll truly make the choice when you're ready. So you make some false choices, which we also do. That's fine. That's part of the process sometimes. But you'll know when you've really done it and made the choice. And then here's the thing about happiness too, is once you really make that choice, and again I know, you can't really go back. You'll never go back. When you really made the choice to love yourself and to be happy, and the two go hand in hand, if you don't love yourself, you're not going to be able to make any choice to be happy. That comes from self-love. So once you really love yourself and commit to loving yourself, which then in hand means making yourself happy. So really, the choice to be happy really is the choice of self-love. It really is. It's just part of it. It's the next step. Because if you love someone, you want to make them happy, right? or do whatever you can to assist them in their happiness. So really, happiness is a choice, but it's really the first choice is self-love. With all things, it's self-love. So make the choice or work towards making the choice of self-love, and then happiness will come because you'll be committed to it. So yeah, not sure what else to say. And it's all up to you. You are the master of your own experience in all things. All things. Love you. Love and light.